All right, so you've got your advanced research methods class on the horizon, and you want to walk in there feeling totally prepared, right? You're in the right place. We are going to break down the core choices you'll be making as a researcher and really just demystify this whole process, step by step. So, let's start with the biggest question of all. Where do you even begin? It can feel like a huge, tangled mess, but here's the secret. Research isn't a single path. It's actually a series of really important choices that you make, and each one builds on the last, shaping your entire project.
And here's our game plan. Think of it like a funnel. We're going to start at the very top with the big philosophical choices, then narrow it down to the different research strategies, and finally get into the super practical stuff like how to write your research question and frame your study. Let's get into it.
Okay, Section 1. Before you can even think about doing a survey or an interview, we have to talk about the philosophical ideas that are kind of hiding underneath it all. See, every single research study is built on a foundation of ideas about what knowledge is and what reality is.
And it all boils down to two core building blocks. First, you've got epistemology. That's a fancy way of asking what even counts as knowledge. Are we looking for hard, objective facts, or are we trying to understand people's subjective experiences? Then there's ontology, which asks, what's the nature of reality? Is it one single measurable thing, or is it something that we all kind of create together through our interactions? These might sound, well, pretty abstract, but trust me, your answers to these questions are going to guide every single decision you make from here on out. So, those big philosophical choices, they lead you directly to the two main paths in social research, quantitative and qualitative. Think of them as the two major highways you can take on your research journey. First up, the quantitative highway. This path is all about deduction. That means you start with a theory, you create a specific hypothesis, and then you go out into the world to collect data to test it. It's got its roots in the natural sciences, it's all about measurement, numbers, and seeing the social world as an objective reality that we can analyze. Basically, you're looking for patterns by turning the world into numbers.
On the other hand, we have qualitative research. Now, this strategy is inductive. Instead of starting with a theory to test, you're often trying to build a theory from the ground up based on your data. This path is all about words, stories, and understanding how individuals interpret their own lives. It sees social reality as something that's constantly being created by people. It's about diving deep into the richness of human experience.
And here's how it all connects in a nice, neat table. You can see the divide, right? Quantitative is deductive, it's positivist, and it's objectivist. Qualitative is inductive, interpretivist, and constructionist. The big takeaway here is that your choice of method isn't random. It flows directly from your fundamental view of the world and what you think you can learn from it.
But, and this is super important, in the real world, these lines can get pretty blurry. A study isn't always 100% one or the other. These are more like guiding principles than super strict rules, which actually leads us perfectly into our next topic.
So if the lines can blur, why not just cross them on purpose? That is the entire idea behind mixed methods research. It's all about combining quantitative and qualitative approaches to get a much richer, more complete picture than either one could give you on its own. It's kind of like getting the best of both worlds.
Let's look at a real-world example to make this stick, the foot and mouth disease crisis in Britain. So first, researchers sent out a survey to get the numbers. That's the what. What percentage of people trust the government's information? That's the quantitative part. But then they held focus groups with some of those same people to understand why they felt that way, the stories, the fears, the reasoning behind the numbers. That's the qualitative part. And this quote from the researchers who did the study, it just says it all. By combining the methods, they got a more complete account. The numbers gave them the pattern, but the stories told them what that pattern actually meant. That right there is the power of mixed methods.
Okay, we've talked about the big picture strategies. Now it's time to zoom in, to get to the absolute heart of your study, the research question itself. This thing is so crucial, and it has to be perfectly in tune with the research path you've decided to take.
So, for a qualitative study, your question is going to be open-ended and exploratory. It usually starts with how or what, and uses these really active verbs like discover, understand, or explore. You aren't trying to prove anything. You're on a journey to deeply understand something from the perspective of the people who are living it.
A quantitative question is a whole different beast. Or, more often, it's framed as a hypothesis. It's incredibly precise and predictive. You're either comparing groups or looking for a relationship between variables. The classic null hypothesis, for example, makes a bold, specific claim that there is no difference or no relationship. Your job as the researcher is to collect enough evidence to try and reject that claim.
And what about mixed methods? Well, that needs its own special kind of question, one that's all about integration. It specifically asks how one type of data, like the qualitative stories, is going to help explain or add context to the other type of data, like the quantitative numbers.
We have made it to the bottom of our funnel. You've got your philosophy, you've chosen a strategy, you've crafted your question. So how do you wrap all of that up into a powerful introduction that makes someone actually want to read your study?
A really effective way to do this is using what's called the deficiencies model. It's basically a 5-step story. First, you hook the reader with the research problem. Then, you summarize what other researchers have already found. Step 3 is the big pivot. This is where you point out the gap, the deficiency, the thing that we still don't know. Then you argue why filling that gap is so important. And finally, you wrap it up with a clear purpose statement that says, here is exactly what my study is going to do.
So just think of your introduction as telling a really compelling story. It sets the scene with what we know, it builds suspense by revealing what we don't know, and then it presents your study as the hero, the crucial next chapter that's going to push our understanding forward.
And that's it. From the highest level philosophy all the way down to a 5-step model for your intro, you now have the complete roadmap for how to design a really powerful and thoughtful study. You're all set for that lesson. So the only question left is, what questions will you ask?